Beth, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, awesome. Great.
I like your background.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is the background I had when I was in my other place. I was staying with a friend of mine and I was in his basement. So I didn't want people to see the basement. And now I want to get rid of it because I got like some nice pictures behind me. So
I gotta start my video. Sorry about that. There we go.
all right. How you doing, Beth?
I'm doing fine this morning.
That's
Good and rested, ready to go.
All right. I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome. Okay. So first of all, let me just say that what I'll do is something called Mindful Morning. And basically what I do is I discuss various pathways of spirituality and spiritual exercises, mindfulness, meditation, and we discuss like people's personal journeys as well as how what we practice and what we believe could help the world around us in modern times.
Right.
So I've done a few of these. I've spoken to a young lady who was she was a shaman who was learning like Peruvian spirituality. A Tibetan Buddhist woman who actually certified me to teach meditation and mindfulness. There was a gentleman who I just spoke to who works at a company called Art of Living, and they do breath work. So I'm taking a class with them this Friday. He agreed to do this with me. So I want to get as diverse a group of people as possible and just put as much positive energy out there as possible to put it out there for the world to see. And I'm really blessed and grateful that you took the time out of your schedule to talk to me.
No problem. Happy to do it. Like to spread the word myself. So.
All right. Excellent. Cool. So let's start with let's introduce yourself to the people and let's talk about your book. I definitely want you to promote your book as well.
Okay. So my name is Beth Gibbs. I have been practicing yoga for over 25 years. I have basically been writing most of my life, but I never considered myself a writer or an author because in my mind, a writer and an author had an agent and a traditional publishing company. And a few years ago, I realized that I am a writer. If I write, I'm a writer. And so I transitioned from writer to author a few years ago, and I have 2 books. I also have a fairly regular yoga practice. And of course, a lot of my writing is about yoga. And I've been teaching students of all ages. I think the youngest one I ever taught was 3 and the oldest was 103. So,
wow.
Yeah, so I've never been one who says I practice a certain type or tradition of yoga. For me, yoga is not about crafting a sequence, having people come into class and fitting the people into the sequence. I go into class with some ideas in my head and I see who's in front of me. And I've gotten pretty good at scoping out how much people can do based on who they present themselves to be in the space. And then I craft the class to them. And what I learned in my training, which I think is really valuable, is that there are 8 limbs of yoga and written down by Patanjali many thousands of years ago, but nobody knows if we don't even know if he's a he. But we know it was written down. And there are 8 limbs. So in every single class, I try to incorporate all of 8 limbs. And unfortunately, to my way of thinking, in most Western yoga classes, the focus is on postures and doing postures a certain way, which is sometimes considered the correct way. And my attitude is, my body don't always bend that way. So if your body don't bend that way, then we need to find a variation of that posture to express the quality that posture wants to express. For instance, strengthening and grounding. One of my favorite postures is down facing dog because you have your hands and your feet on the floor and the rest of your body is in the air like an upside down V. And it is both strengthening and it is relaxing. But if you can't get down on the floor, you still need to be able to experience that quality. So there are variations that you can do seated on the floor or seated in a chair. So I've made it my business to understand a wide variety of variations so that everybody who comes to class gets that full 8-limbed experience of yoga. And
Right.
of course, the last step, well, the last three steps: concentration, meditation, and then samadhi. And so the meditation, I started a few years ago of ending each class with a moment or two of meditation to sort of get people to understand what that is.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Now let's go back a little bit. How did you
Mhm.
get into yoga? Were you like raised in a yoga tradition, or how did you get introduced to it?
Well, I've always liked to move. So, as a kid, tap toe, ballet, dance recitals.
Mhm.
In college, it was modern dance and band because I could move in the dance studio and I could move on the football field playing the
Okay.
clarinet. As long
Mhm.
as I was moving, I was good.
Mhm.
Then after marriage came motherhood, and that was a whole different ball game, and I did not have the time to go out and take all the movement classes that I had been doing. So
Mhm.
I went to the library and went to the self-help section, one of my favorite sections ever, and I found a book by Richard Hittleman, the very, very late Richard Hittleman. He's been gone a long time. And it
Mhm.
was a 30-day yoga exercise program. So I said, oh, this looks interesting. So I
Mhm.
took it home and started practicing. I got hooked, but I couldn't take classes. And then, still because of the time. And then one summer, we were vacationing on the vineyard with my then husband's family. And the wife of his friend said, Beth, you want to go to a yoga class? And I was like, you take yoga? At back then, you did not see many Black folks either
Right.
in yoga or meditation classes.
Mhm.
And I said, you do yoga? And
Mhm.
she said, oh, yeah. So she took me to a class. And when I experienced the energy and the difference between doing yoga at home by yourself or doing it in a class with other people, the difference in the energy was palpable.
Mhm.
I was doubly hooked. So
Right.
I went home. I said, I will find a class that fits my schedule. And that one thing led to another. Next thing I knew, I was in a 200-hour training, then a 300-hour training, then a 1,000-hour training, and then certified as a yoga therapist. And then boom, it was, yeah. So
Wow. How long ago? You said 25 years, right?
at least, yeah, I'm really bad at numbers. I
Okay.
took my training in 1995, and I know I started practice teaching when I came home from the training. So since 1995.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
1995, the golden era of hip hop music. So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question. When you began really dedicating yourself to yoga like that,
Mhm.
how did you change? Because anything you do is going to change you. How did that change you?
Whoa, it was amazing. Like
Mhm.
most people, as I mentioned before, I like to move. So the reason I went to classes was for the movement.
Mhm.
And after about a year or so of this one class that I was able to go to, um, I have a thing about my car. If it starts up when I put the key in the ignition, I'm good. If
Mhm.
it doesn't, or if there's a problem with the car, I go into panic mode because it means I'm going to be late or I can't meet my obligation, and that totally freaks me out.
Right.
So one night I came out from yoga class and I reached in my pocketbook for my car keys and they weren't there.
Oh,
And I
wow.
looked into the car and I said, oh, they're in the ignition. I forgot to take them out. So I said, well, the people are still downstairs. So I went downstairs, told them what my problem was. The police station was across the street. Someone went over with me. We got the cop. He came out with that little thingy to open
Mhm.
up the car door. I
Mhm.
got in, started the car out. I was driving out of the parking lot when I slammed on the brake and I said, I didn't panic. Whoa, this yoga thing is way more than movement.
Mhm.
And that started the inner journey. So as a result of taking yoga beyond the movement, I've become a lot calmer,
Mhm.
a lot more resilient, a lot clearer about who I am and what I'm supposed to do in life, a
Mhm.
lot kinder and more compassionate to other people who get on my last nerve. And there's always a few of those.
Always. Always.
Yes.
Always.
And then and then I tapped into my creativity, which I'd always had, but I never I was too busy managing family, raising my son, making the salary, following the lessons that I got from my mom, my aunt, and my cousins, which is, as a Black woman, you need an education, you need to get a salary job, you need to save your money, you need to be independent, because you're going to go move into a world that is not going to care whether or not you succeed.
Right.
Boom. So I still take those lessons in, but I was able to navigate them in a very different way, a much more satisfying way.
Gotcha. Now that brings me to another question. You said something I found interesting. Earlier, you were talking about how there weren't a lot of Black people doing yoga and meditation when you first started. So it seems that things are changing now. But when you first began, did people welcome you with open arms? Was it a little bit of who is she? What she doing here? What was the energy like when you first started practicing?
It depended. Actually, I'm saying now in the yoga class I took, I didn't feel like an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
In the training I took, I didn't feel like an outsider, because the gentleman who ran the school, and whom I still consider my main teacher, was kind of a very strange person, but
Mm-hmm.
he was strange. You know how human beings have their little quirks. He had lots of quirks, but his message, it was like when he would sit in front of the classroom and go into teaching, you could almost like see a little,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was somewhere else, and the
Right.
lessons were coming out. And
Mm-hmm.
so because of the way he presented those lessons, there was no differentiation between who was sitting in front of him.
Right.
And even when he switched back out of that, there really wasn't, because in short order I found myself on his teaching staff.
Right.
Yeah. So what I saw was, in the early trainings, there were not a lot of us. And it was always wonderful when I would see one or two. And of course, in the past few years, there are many, many, many more. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say, if I felt any weirdness at all, it was from other Black people when I told them that I did yoga. And then, of course, from if you're trying to write about it, I'm not sure, but it seemed like that perhaps what I was writing and submitting for publication may or may not have been treated differently because of who I was.
Right.
Now I think Black folks who are writing and submitting stuff are getting a very different level of acceptance from magazines and journals, because DEI is now a new buzzword.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Now, when I go around trying to teach mindfulness and meditation, the first place I brought it was my hometown, Hartford, Connecticut, which is a home, it's a city that has some issues. And
Yes.
I would feel at times that people, once I presented meditation to them, were okay with it. They really enjoyed it. They liked it. But it was getting past that original barrier of what people's preconceptions of
Right.
meditation are.
Right.
Did you experience that as well when you trying to teach that to Black people? Because a
Um,
lot of people
yeah.
were born Christian. A lot of people around me were born Christian. I don't practice a religion, but because of
Mhm.
Christianity, there's this fear you're gonna empty your mind, and this is something I've
That's right.
actually heard. You empty your mind and demons jump in your body. Like,
That's exactly right. I mean, one of my last salary job was running Camp Current, which
mhm,
is one of the oldest and largest free day camps for city kids in the country.
mhm,
So one of the first things I did when I got that job is I said, we need to have a yoga program for these childrens.
mhm,
And several parents refused to let their kids partake in the yoga classes because they of exactly what you said. The devil's going to come in.
mhm,
Um, but most had no objection. The kids themselves, I have found kids to be more open to all of this
mhm,
yoga, all aspects of yoga, the chants, the hand positions, the mudras. Those kids will do anything. And they will tell you, they did tell me exactly how they felt. And it was because kids would say to us, they would come up from a forward bend and they would say, "Oh, miss, that was so relaxing." We
mhm,
never told them that
mhm,
inverting or forward bending would calm the nervous system.
mhm,
They would tell us that, they would experience that. And from what they told us, that's where my first book came from. I said, we have a curriculum for these kids. And we just took what they told us and I turned them into stories and turned them into that curriculum into a book. So in general, I found kids are way more open than adults. There are way more Black folks in my yoga classes now than ever before, which is wonderful. And you could watch the progression over the years, you know, 1 here, 2 here, a few years later, 3 or 4. And so that is truly wonderful. And I think that is changing, although there will be some people who are going to stick to that idea because it's so strange and they think yoga is a religion. I say, no, yoga is sourced from the Hindu religion, but it is not a religion. It is a method of internal spiritual development. It's a way of finding, my phrase, clarity, contentment, and resilience in a complicated world.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I would do is, even though I love talking about the spiritual dynamic of meditation, I had to like learn so much about neuroscience. If I approach it from like, this is the neuroscience, and I show how it can improve people's lives, that makes them a little less afraid. Some of them are still afraid no matter what, because some people are afraid of the devil just as much as they're afraid of science. But I figure if I could do the neuroscientific perspective, that usually sometimes work. So what was your like your breakthrough? When did you start to see that, okay, more of us are getting comfortable with learning about yoga? When was that moment when you said, okay, I'm starting to see more of us come in?
Oh, probably. I'm really bad on dates and times, but I'm going to say maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
I saw more and more folks in class. And then I began to see that there were actual organizations of Black yoga teachers. And I saw those evolve. And now there is one that has Black folks, Black yoga teachers in it from all over the world, that has conferences every year. They were in person. They're kind of virtual at the moment, but they'll go back to that. But they have a huge following, a huge membership. So yes, so those things are changing. Have changed.
That's excellent. That's absolutely excellent. So you have immersed yourself in yoga. I mean, now you've been doing it for 25 years. Do you still feel like there's more for you to learn, or do you feel like
absolutely. I had a dinner party at my house one time, and a friend came with his girlfriend, and she asked me when the conversation turned to yoga because he told her I was a yoga teacher, and she said, "Oh, do you teach beginner, intermediate, or advanced yoga?" And I was like, "I teach yoga. There's always a beginner's mind. So that this whole concept of beginner, intermediate, and advanced, I just throw that out the window. I teach yoga. You get from it what you can get from it. And when the focus, when you tell people the focus that yoga may not necessarily cure anything that you're dealing with, but it can help you manage symptoms. And two things I can almost 90% guarantee, because there's no 100% guarantees. I said, it will help you reduce the impact of stress on your physical and physiological body. Full stop. Research backs that up. And there are a couple of postures without fail that I have heard from seniors help deal with occasional constipation. So I teach that in class, and they'll come back and they say, "Oh, that really worked." But no, I mean, there's so much to learn. I mean, especially in terms of the philosophy, the traditions, the ancient texts. So no, I still consider myself a beginner. I mean, I may have 1,000 hours certification. I may be certified here and certified there, but I am still absolutely learning, and I will until I transition off the planet.
Right. Gotcha. So one thing that I'm trying to learn more about meditation is how I can use meditation and mindfulness for trauma. Have you ever like explored using yoga as a means of helping people deal with the effects of trauma, the physiological effects of trauma?
Well, I'm not going to say specifically, but because I have had people in my classes that have experienced trauma. And one example was for my master's degree in yoga therapy and mind body health. My topic was menopause. And so I had a group of women who agreed to be my guinea pigs to test out my my sequences and my suggestions. And one of the things I did was while they were in relaxation, I did a visualization, first grounding them in their body and then asking them to sort of imagine themselves getting up, looking around the room, seeing the other people, walking outside, putting their feet in the grass, that kind of thing, and then coming back in. And when I brought them up, one woman said to me, I hope you never do that again. And I said, why? And she said, because I suffer from panic disorder and it's hard enough for me to be in my body. So when you take me out of it, and because it was a yoga therapy class, I had asked them in the beginning to fill out an assessment sheet. So I said to her, you didn't put any of that on your assessment sheet. And her response was, I didn't think it was important. So that taught me that if I don't know someone well, I do not know what traumas or experiences or conditions they've had. If I am unable to assess them and their level of comfort with going into the mind, then I got to stick with breath and body.
Right.
Now, that said, move in January, I'm going to have the opportunity to address many hundreds of people in as part of the Trauma Research Foundation workshop they're doing in January. So I will be taking that lesson because I don't have a certification in yoga for trauma, but I will be taking that lesson. So my focus will be on postures for grounding, feeling comfortable, relieving stress, breath practices for grounding, being comfortable, and also for energizing and balancing if you need it. Mind stuff, if I do anything, and I will because I have to, it's 5 layers of self-awareness. So when I begin to deal with mind and the witness, my guided meditation is going to be, let's help you go to your safe space. It could be a place in your home, it could be a time in your life, it could be being outside in nature, it could be lying in bed wrapped in a nice polar blanket, but wherever you feel 110% safe and comfortable, that's where you're going. And then I will take you through 5 sense experience of being in that space, and then bring them out. But also saying, if at any time you feel uncomfortable or you feel difficult material popping up, even in your safe space, you have permission, and absolute permission, to stop and just don't pay any attention to what I'm saying and do whatever you need to do to make you feel safe. Yeah. So that's how I handle it.
Yeah. I know when I was when I first started really going into mindfulness and meditation, I was suffering from severe panic attacks and stuff. So I began to explore mindfulness as a way of controlling it, and it really was helpful. But then I got so gung ho, I became I really wanted to experiment. So I was doing all kinds of meditation experiments, and I didn't have a guide, I didn't have a guru, anything. And I ended up, one time I was foolishly experimenting with self-hypnosis, and all these memories from childhood that I had repressed came up. So that's I had to learn, be very careful when you're dealing with trauma. But the thing about it is, with me, I've studied, at that point in time, I studied mindfulness for a little while. So when the memories came up, I was able to ground myself and be in the present moment. But I could understand how somebody else could really have a moment where things get really, really dark and they might lose control. So yeah, I had to learn that. Yeah, and I learned a lot of that just from using my own body as a laboratory to experiment, which may have been a bad idea.
Right, and because one of the cardinal rules I follow is, if I have not practiced or experienced a particular posture, breath practice, mudra, or whatever, I got no business trying to teach it to somebody else until it's moved through all of my 5 layers of self-awareness. So absolutely.
Gotcha. So remember, this is a safe space. So I want to have to ask you this question. In my meditations, I've had some interesting, I don't want to use the word supernatural, but I've had some interesting experiences. I mean, one time I was meditating and I was listening to Indian music. I'm laying in my bed. There's a window over here. Sunlight's coming through the window. And I see Krishna floating over me. I don't see his face, but I see him spinning around. And he grabs a beam of sunlight and stabs me in the forehead with it. My body starts to... Have you had any of those experiences, or is it just me being a lunatic?
No, I think a lot of people have those experiences, different ones, and at different times. Of the first experience I had that I would consider spiritual in a way is I was 12 years old, and we were on vacation, and we were climbing a mountain, and I thought, I don't want to be on this mountain. It's hard, it's uphill, blah, 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 blah. But when we got to the top, whatever I considered me, my ego, little ego self, whatever, disappeared. I mean, I was totally absorbed in that. And when you're in something like that, you don't know you're in it till you're out of it.
Right.
And it was like, what the hell was that?
Right.
And the second time it happened, I was in a very stressful time, job-wise, relationship-wise. And I picked up a hobby of needle pointing. Again, movement, my hands were moving, my mind's moving to keep up the stitches, because I didn't do the easy thing of going to the store and buying a kit. I designed my own. I bought a book on African fabrics and design, and I had to design my own. So I was in the middle of transferring the design from the book to the net, and I disappeared. Right. And the next time I became aware of myself, an hour had passed.
Wow.
And that's what I call the bliss state. So most of my experiences have been, I've lost myself. Right. And sometimes when I'm meditating, you can feel your boundaries disappear. I can't off the top of my head recall anything that I've experienced like you've experienced in terms of seeing something else. I'll get little nudges inside, that inner voice. At any time during the day, it says, don't do that. Oh, here's one.
Yeah.
I was in Florida at a yoga training. I'd been trying to sell my house because at that point my husband had passed and I was in a financial bind, and I was trying to sell this big house we had bought unsuccessfully. So there I am in bed in Florida, away from everything. I wake up in the morning. There is a clear voice in my head. It said, go home and put your house on the market. I had no idea where that came from. I followed, I went home, put my house on the market, and in less than 2 weeks it sold. Wow. So it's those kind of things that happen to me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
And this brings me to this is something that I've always had trouble answering this question, because I don't know if it's my personal experiences or how things are in general. But do you think that some people, I know that we all have the potential to reach that bliss state, but do you think that some people are predisposed to it? Because that experience when you was 12 reminds me of certain experiences I had when I was, around the same age. I remember when I used to have this fantasy writer, Lloyd Alexander. He wrote this book called The High King. I don't know if you know that series, but I read a book that he had written. There was a series called The Illyriate or something like that. There was a character who would meditate in the book, and he would just sit and go into a bliss state. So me being a kid, I was probably I think like 11 or something like that. I said, let me try this. So I sat down and tried it. And then next thing you know, I was like you said, an hour went by. And then it got to the point where I would sit down and meditate every day. And then I had to stop myself because I would go into that bliss state. Even when I was in school. I'd be in school and I got 2-3 hours to go by to be sitting there. So I think I may have been predisposed, but I don't know if everybody's I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think people who are curious and people who are self-aware beyond I got to get up in the morning, brush my teeth, go to school, study, eat, play games, but you begin to question and think. So I think if you are someone who approaches life that way, I think you're probably more likely to attract those states to you, because as you know, as a meditator, what's under our control is our ability to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set aside time. I'm going to pick a technique, and I'm going to do it every day. And whether or not the bliss state finds you, that's not under your control. But if you're the kind of person, and you sound like you're that kind of person who begins to question and wonder and speculate, then I think that kind of attracts the bliss state, because it wants everybody.
Right.
It's there for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's a very good way of putting it. So a couple years ago, everybody thought the world was going to end. We had
Yeah.
COVID, we had
Oh,
Trump
yeah.
in office, quarantine, everybody was freaking out. Um, I was going through a rough period of time myself. My wife and I had separated.
Mhm.
I was living in a basement of a friend of mine's house.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I put on a bunch of weight because I was drinking beer, which I don't even drink, but it was nothing else to do. So, and then
Mhm.
that's kind of when I recently rediscovered the importance of meditation and mindfulness. How did you make it through quarantine and Trump and all that upheat?
Yeah.
Did yoga help you make it through that?
Oh,
What was your
yes.
practice?
Yes, I had a friend of mine has written a book called Yoga for Times of Change, and she wanted in the middle of COVID, she wanted to interview me, and we were talking about the traumas of life and how I processed the death of my husband and how I was going through COVID, and I said, she said, "What postures have helped you?" And I was like, "Oh man." She's so focused on asana. I said, yoga to me is like breathing. I can't sit here and tell you I did downward dog and it helped me process my grief. I did downward dog because my body said, do down face dog, do this mudra, sit in meditation, do this, do this. I just followed the lead and it's not just asana. So yes, yoga has helped me through the pandemic and the and it expressed itself in nothing else to do with all classes canceled. I wrote, finished my book,
Mhm.
um, got my website up, started writing my blog and started writing for other blogs. And yeah, so, and I'm an introvert. So basically, not having to deal with other people on a regular basis is kind of nice.
Yeah, me too. I was like, it's kind of peaceful. I kind of like it.
I'm having a harder time now re-entering. Really, it's just it's funny, but
Right,
yeah. So
right.
yoga helps me through everything, and it's not just postures. It's the attitude. It's understanding the values, the behaviors, the causes of suffering, the being able to figure out, okay, I'm having a problem. Not being able to define the problem. What is the problem? And once you figure out what the problem is, then the second question, the deeper question is, why am I having this problem? Is it something from the outside? Is it something from the inside? Is it something from the inside that's reacting to the outside? So that's the witness. So
Mhm.
once I figure that out, I say, okay, now what is going to be my strategy to deal with this? Because I plan to be as healthy and mindful as possible for as long as possible. And
Mhm.
so, in order to do that, I have to practice what I preach.
Right,
So
right.
that's what got me through. And I did not put on the what did they take the quarantine 15?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not put that on. I actually stayed the same and maybe even dropped a pound or two
Oh, okay.
because
Mhm.
one of my friends, because the exercise class that I taught at the local YMCA for seniors, of course, that was out. One
Right.
of the people in the class said, let's walk. And I said, great, there's lots of great places outside we can walk for exercise. No, she has a lot of allergies. So for a year and a half, we've been meeting 3 times a week at the Buckland Hills Mall and walking
Mhm.
2 miles.
Oh, wow.
That's, yeah,
Mhm.
exercise and yoga and writing got me, and chocolate got me through.
Now I think I was so excited about having this interview with you. I think you influenced me because yesterday, yeah, I think because yesterday I did a live stream for an app called Insight Timer that I do live streams on.
Yep.
And something you said was connected to what I was talking about last night. I was talking about the body as a doorway to God and how we've been
Hmm.
kind of raised to be kind of separated from our bodies. And you were saying
Hmm.
follow the body's lead. And I think that's so important. I think we
Yes.
live in a culture that makes us almost ashamed of our bodies because of that
Yes.
Christian upbringing, born in sin, and
Hmm.
Jesus had to die because our
Yep.
bodies are corruptible and all of that stuff. And I
Hmm.
think that when you learn how to follow the body's lead, the body,
Hmm.
you understand the body knows what's best for you, and the body
Yes.
can be used as a the body can be used as an instrument to bring you to a safe space and to divinity.
Absolutely. And it's the first layer of self-awareness out of
Mhm.
the five because it's up it's up close and personal. It's available to our five senses. And I just read a quote And Naomi Judd said this: the mind will listen to everything the body tells it, if you're open and understand. And according to neuroscience, you probably already know this, there are like all the neurons, of the thousands of neurons that are in the brain, there are at least 60,000 brain cells in your gut. There are about 40,000 brain cells in your heart.
Yeah.
So it is all connected. It's all connected. So how can you separate? We and I call it, people say it's that this real world, the world we live in, is an illusion. I do not like that word, because illusion has the connotation of not real. I slap you across your face, you are going to feel it, right?
That's real.
So I like to use the term relative reality. Yes, everything is connected. And according to science and the deepest philosophy, we are nothing but energy vibrating into a solid state. That's fine. But I have to navigate my way through this 5 sense material world in some kind of balanced or wise way, or I'm going to be miserable. Right. And so I have to take into consideration my body, my breath, my energy, my mind, my emotions. I have to use my wisdom if I want the bliss state to visit me. Right. So that's how I see it. Yeah.
And you were saying that you were always sort of an active physical person. Was it like, for me, I was always a person who was, I was very devoutly religious. When I do anything, I go all the way. Mm-hmm. So it was a struggle for me to learn how to be less restrictive with my body and let my body lead me. Was it a struggle for you? Or was it something that was easy because it's how you are by nature?
Yeah, it was kind of easy for me because I've always been, I think it started with dance classes, because you're required to have a high level of proprioception, knowing where your body is in space. Mm-hmm. So and this, in yoga classes, I'll sometimes say, raise your right arm out to shoulder height. Some people will have it 2 inches from their body. Some people will be overhead. A lot of people do not know where their body is in space because they're not paying attention to it. Oh, wow. I have kind of always known where my body has been in space. And even when I have had the occasional fall, I'm able to, as I'm falling, sort of switch my body position so that I don't land and break a bone. Right. So I'm blessed that way. It was natural for me. Some people have to learn that. But yeah, I've always kind of known where my body was, what it was doing, and how it feels. Now, does that happen all the time? Well, sometimes you can go for weeks saying, something's up, something's up, something's up, without kind of knowing what it is. Then you have to consciously place your attention on what that is and say, well, is this something serious? Did I fall? Am I getting an onset of some kind of illness? So you really have to tune into the body and pay attention. And in most yoga classes, they will say, before you can get to a point where you can quiet your mind, you have to move your body. I mean, that's the progression of the 8 limbs of yoga. Move your body, balance your breath, begin to relax the mind, and then you'll be able to go to the next step, which is meditation and true tuning in.
Right. Gotcha. See, I learned, like I said, I learned meditation and mindfulness just from reading that book. And even after I became, more mindful, I definitely had to learn how to listen to my body and accept my body. Because, I guess just growing up in the culture that I grew up in, as a man, your body is a battering ram. It ain't necessarily a fine-tuned instrument. So you got to kind of learn that. So that's something I had to learn, is to really pay attention to the subtle things of my body. I know if I'm trying to build something and I got to carry 200 pounds, I know that. But if my body is saying, hey, I need some sleep, that's something I would just ignore. So yeah, that's something that we had to learn. Something I had to learn, definitely. And I think a lot of men are like that too. Do you notice that there's a difference between men and women when it comes to learning yoga and being body aware, things of that nature?
Well, not surprisingly, I'm sure most of the students I've taught in my whole life have been women. Men seem to not, at least not to my classes. I mean, maybe if there's and I'm kind of betting that in a what's labeled an advanced vinyasa class, you might find more men, because the movement is faster. they say it's more powerful. I might question that. And there's more competition, to see, well, can you stand on your head? Can you do these kinds of things?
Right.
The few men I've had in my class, they don't last very long. They may come for one session and then not see them again. But I have a couple of guys now who are, I have one gentleman who's an EMT. He's there every single week. He's a veteran. And he says he comes to my class because he's a very stressful job. And in my class, he can relax. He has different, because I've said to them, if you want to lie down on the floor, fine. If you prefer to do this seated, fine. You're going to get variations. You will be able to participate in the class no matter your ability. And so he does half the class in the chair and feels fine about it. So I'm really grateful for that. But no, I do, at least in my experience, women tend to be more open to yoga classes than men. I hope that changes.
Definitely. I mean, think about it. We've seen a lot of progress thus far, so I think things will change in time. Because at one point in time, you were saying you didn't see a whole lot of Black people. Now you got whole coalitions formed. So
that's right. And there are more Black men going through yoga training to become yoga therapists. I know at least 3 or 4.
That's excellent.
And one of my good friends in Chicago, he came through the training, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and he's going gangbusters.
Okay, excellent. So let me ask this question. This is something that I've heard from individuals who have practiced yoga and other Eastern kinds of spirituality. They feel like when it comes to the West, a lot of is changed in the spiritual. To put it bluntly, they feel like the spiritual guts have been ripped out and is left with the shell.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned that sometimes, for a lot of men doing the advanced vinyasa yoga is like more competitive, but yoga is not supposed to be about competition. So do you feel like that happens a lot, where you have these principles that start off one way in its original form, then we bring it here and people will take it and kind of Americanize it, so to speak?
Yeah, well, it had definitely, because in the deepest traditions of yoga, there was no such thing as asana classes. There were a few positions. They were meditation positions. It wasn't until the British colonized India that we found asana classes coming. Largely, they came from the European gym culture.
Right. Okay.
Yes. So what you have now is a combination of asanas. Some may be rooted in some of those traditional postures. Most were developed while the British were colonizing India. Of course, that came over to the West. And what did we do it? We decided that you need to look good in spandex, and you need to be able to sell your yoga by selling yourself. And so the whole competition of promotion and marketing fits in, and the spirituality can be drained out. I'm not going to say it's always drained out, but it can more easily be drained out. So you find most or many, I don't like to be, say, do it with a broad brush, but many yoga programs and books and classes are focused on asana. They leave out the yamas and niyamas, the values and the behaviors. They focus on asana. They don't do a whole lot of breath work. They don't do a whole lot of guided or helping people understand what relaxation is and how to get to it. They don't do a lot of meditation, and they don't really encourage people to go deeper. They say you need to do X, Y, and Z to perfect your triangle pose. Not recognizing that for most Westerners, triangle pose is going to mess up your pelvis, because you grew up sitting in a chair, not sitting on the floor. And if people don't know their own bodies, how do they say to or in their heads, I can't do what the teacher's doing, but I know how to vary it this way to keep my pelvis aligned and proper and happy, so that when I sit for meditation or lie down in relaxation, I'm not in pain. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do you think that some of that exclusion of spiritual concepts is because, and this is a question that may be a loaded question, but do you
Mhm.
think America or the West is just less spiritual, or let's even take it to the extreme? You think the West has become godless?
Well, I don't think the West is godless. I think what you find is that there are variations of how it is perceived and practiced. I
Hmm.
think a lot of organized religions have, in my mind, have kind of gone off the rails
Hmm.
to extremes. And I've had people who call themselves Christians say the most god awful things about other people. And in my head, I'm going, you call yourself a Christian. Now, I know I do not follow any organized religion, but I thought I am more compassionate than you are. So I don't understand this. So you have, and even the people who call themselves agnostics or atheists, I think they are practicing compassion.
Hmm.
And this thing happened in India too. I mean, it used to be a point in time where religion was and the culture was run by priests. And
Hmm.
if you wanted something, you went to a priest and you had a ritual done and so forth. Then about maybe 3,000 years ago, there Samkhya philosophy came into being, where people said, you know, maybe we're depending too much on what these priests and what this organized religion tells us, and we need to move inside.
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of that is happening now in America, where individuals are spending more time going inside, figuring out who they are and how they can express that in the culture in a compassionate way. Because depending upon how you view the divine, we are, everything in the universe is part of one big whole. So you cannot say that you are not God or you are, or someone else is godless. That's just your perception of it.
Hmm.
It's just, it's all there. It's how you focus your awareness. So that's what I would say.
Right. Great answer. So let's talk about your book. Do you have a copy of your book? Show everybody your book.
Yes, I have two books. This
Yes.
one
Yes.
is called Ogie Bogie, the Elephant Yogi. And it's a storybook. It's a stories about yoga for children. And it was developed from my work with the kids at Camp Current. And so it is basically helping kids learn how to practice yoga to wake up, to relax, to focus, and to cooperate with other people.
Mhm.
And this is my latest book. It's called Enlighten Up, Finding Clarity, Contentment, and Resilience in a Complicated World. And I learned this model of self-awareness from my yoga training. In Sanskrit, it's called the koshas, meaning sheaths. I just call it layers because it's easier to understand in English that, you know, you peel your layers away and you can, it's kind of like the Russian dolls, you know, you take one out, there's a smaller one, there's a smaller one, and you go, mhm.
Mhm.
So the layers are like that. Except in many pictures, the biggest layer, well, let me just say the 5 layers are body and environment, breath and energy, mind and emotions, intuitive wisdom / the witness, and bliss. So when these 5 layers are depicted in a lot of Western cultures, the largest layer, the bliss layer, is the smallest one at the center, and the largest one is the physical body. But
Mhm.
traditionally, in yoga tradition and philosophy, the largest one is the bliss layer. And theoretical physicists would agree with this.
Mhm.
The largest, the biggest, the energy, and then it vibrates in and in and in down through mind, witness, breath, energy to body. And the body is the smallest, but it's the body that we're living in to take us through Earth School. So our job is to figure out how to take care of the body, but then expand our awareness out and out and out and out and out until we totally connect with bliss or
Right.
energy or the universe or whatever, or God or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So how long did it take you to write the Enlighten Up book? 'Cause I
Yep.
read that, and one thing about the book was the fact that it was that blew my mind was and this is gonna sound strange, but I write too. So
Mhm.
it's the efficiency of the way you use your words. You pack so much information and so much emotion into
Mhm.
small spaces. So it must have, I mean, it must have taken you a long time to get everything so perfect because everything was just lined up so perfect. You had so much cram packed in every paragraph. They would be like yoga references, personal references, funny jokes, all in one. It was amazing. How long did it take you to get it like that?
Well, I started, actually, this came from, I applied to and got a position of being a guest writer for a blog called Yoga for Healthy Aging.
Mhm.
So I was submitting posts every single month. And then at some point I realized, you know what? I might have a book here. So I took all of those blog posts, changed, added, did stuff like that. So that was from I'm going to say 2015. And I kind of worked on it a little bit here, a little bit there for 3 years, just poking stuff together. But it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I said, I'm going to get this done.
Right.
So I sat down and, for that whole time, I just basically focused in, and I knew that I was not going to write an academic book. I was not going to write a deep yoga philosophy book. I said, because I want people who have never stepped foot on a yoga mat or in a yoga class to be able to read this book and understand what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So, and when I got, and I tried, of course, to get a traditional publisher, I had one bite, but I wasn't comfortable with what they were telling me. So I found a hybrid publisher in Connecticut that I could talk to, and I signed with them. And by the time they got finished editing it, they did a wonderful job. An A-type personality friend of mine says she couldn't find one typo. I felt, but it was longer than this. And the editor said, you need to shorten, we need to cut this, say this in fewer words. So I had a really, 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 really good editor.
That's great.
And,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
I absolutely love the book. Like when you look at the book, I know it might be hard as an artist or as a writer. When you look at the book, what stands out to you about the book?
Basically,
or do you have like a favorite chapter or something like that?
Oh, yeah. My favorite chapter is titled Bitchcraft. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback just on that chapter. So I'm going to expand that into a book. And basically, bitchcraft is how, in my mind, is how you learn to navigate the world assertively, authentically, and compassionately. And there are 3 stages of bitchcraft. And I'm writing it for anybody who has ever felt othered. So it's not directed to women, it's not directed to men, it's directed, because most of us have felt othered at some point in our lives for some reason, race, culture, gender identification, whatever. So when I wrote that chapter, I said, okay, what are the stages of bitchcraft that I have been through? First is silent stuffing, where you don't dare say anything because you've been taught to be a good Black girl. And to walk through life, don't wear patent leather shoes, keep your legs together, that kind of thing, cover up your boobs, all that kind of stuff. Second stage is when that stuffing gets released, you go through anger and rage, and you say nasty things to nasty people who even think they're going to look at you cross-eyed. You give it right back to them. And then the third stage, hopefully where I spend most of my time now, is basically understanding what is being said and figuring out how to respond in an assertive, authentic way, in no uncertain terms, but with kindness and compassion to the person who's being a complete a-hole. So that's my next book. And I had a traditional publisher say to me, oh, it was the editor. I love your title. I love what you're doing. And this was Shambhala, which is a new age, very spiritual, them. And I said, you do? I said, this doesn't sound like what you would want. She said, please send me a proposal. So I sent her in a proposal. The response, after she met with her committee, well, we love your writing. We love your energy. We just need you to change a few things, like the title. I said, no, thank you. Yeah. Now, some people might say, well, that was an opportunity to go with a traditional publisher. My attitude is, you know what? If I never sell one copy, although I know that's not going to be true, I have to write what's true to me. And I have to find a way to get it published in a way that is comfortable for me, because I'm of the age where I'm like, if it ain't fun, I ain't doing it.
I hear you. I hear you.
That's where I am right now. If it ain't fun, I ain't doing it.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
Just that I hope everybody who's listening to this will kind of explore self-awareness, first with the small letter S, how you're going through your life on a daily basis, what you're doing with it. Are you happy? All that kind of stuff. And then begin to explore self-awareness with the capital S, the larger, more spiritual self. But first, you have to deal with moving through this 5 sense material world. And that's what my book will help you do.
Gotcha. Oh yeah. And let them know where they can buy the book.
Oh, sure. Well, it's all over the place. You can go to my website, bethgibbs.com. There's a link there to the publisher and to, Amazon, but it's also on Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, BookBub, and also, what's that? Hudson Books, the ones that are in the airports.
Okay.
They have it online. So there's
Awesome.
lots of places that you can get it. And for the children's book, you also go to my website. There's a link to bookbaby.com. That's where I have it up, but it's also on Amazon and Amazon. Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so appreciative. I'm glad we finally have a chance to speak to each other, because I know you contacted me years ago, but I never had a chance to really sit down and talk with you like this. So I'm so grateful. I got a chance
and I would thank you, and I would love to have you, because I remember I asked about a year ago if you'd be interested in writing a guest post for my blog, and that invitation is still open.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, contact me. I'll put that together for you.
Okay.
And I'm gonna take this interview. I'm gonna put it on my YouTube, and I'll send you the link once it's up there. Okay.
Good. And also, when you send me the link, send me a picture, a headshot of yourself and any logos you use, because I'm gonna put it on my website, and I'm gonna also put it in my newsletter.
All right. Thank you very much.
And online. No problem.
All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, have a good day, Ms.
You too. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.